but then they turned things around, won 10 out of 12, and now they're headed into the playoffs as a 6th seed. Hello, Blazers fans. I am Aaron Fentress, along with my main man, Joe Freeman, and you are watching and or listening to the Blazer Focus podcast brought to you by Bi-Mart and Fred Meyer, and it is playoff time. I have been waiting for this. The regular season is way too long, but you suffer through it to get to this point, and the Blazers are in it looking strong as they've looked all season as they head into the postseason with a series against Denver, which could arguably be the team that they beat in the greatest series win in the last 20 years, just 2 years ago, to get into the West Finals. So, Joe, heading into our first segment here, how'd they do this? What the heck happened? A few weeks ago, I was planning for an early vacation. This thing was going to end in the play-in round, and now they are back. How do you think they turned it around?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. We all knew this was going to happen all season. Go back to like our first one of doing this. I believe we accurately predicted this. So I don't know what you mean.
Predicted what? Oh, at the beginning of the season when we said they'd make the playoffs and be about 5 or 6?
Yeah. That's why they play. That's why they play
72 games. You just got to ride it out.
It's been pretty miraculous comeback by your Portland Trailblazers. It's been fun to watch for sure. I think it surprised a lot of haters, no question, and the Fire Stotts crowd is probably none too pleased. Now, I always wonder about that though. Like if you're a Blazers fan and you're rooting for your coach to get fired, but you're also rooting for your team, like how does that unfold here at the end? Like right now, are you rooting for a first round ouster? Or are you rooting for a deep playoff run? Like that's got to be weird for a fan base.
They're rooting for a title and Stotts to still get fired.
Boy, that would be something else.
I actually tweeted a few days ago. I said we went from 15 days ago. We went from Stotts is to blame. They're horrible. He needs to be fired too. Is this the best Blazers team in 20 years or whatever? It was just a bizarre flip. But fans seem to the fans on Twitter who wanted him gone still want him gone because according to them, they would, if they had a better coach, they wouldn't be the 6th seed. They'd be 1 or 2 anyway. So.
All right. Well, I think the bigger issue right now is us reevaluating our bet.
Oh, gosh.
Fairly recently. I don't know if it was our last gathering or 2 gatherings ago, but I believe there was an over/under that we made that I think you felt pretty comfortable about a couple weeks ago, and now you're probably in regret. I don't know. The face says it all, I guess. Would you like to go over that again?
Yes. Heading into the last 25 games, we set the over/under at 12.5. I took under. You took over. They proceeded. That was when they started that stretch with Milwaukee, and then they got blown out by Milwaukee, and a bunch of other teams are just getting their heads kicked in every other night, it seemed like. And they began that run 3-10. They were 3-10, dude. So I basically just needed 3 more losses to cover. And then they flipped things around. I think you gave Dame a call and said, Dame, yo, listen, man, I can't lose the bet to Fentress because I'll never hear the end of it.
Should I just crack this open now to celebrate? No, I probably shouldn't do that. We probably shouldn't.
So they proceeded to win 10 of 12, which means they went 13-12 during that 25-game stretch. So once again, for the second time in a row, you were right on a game-winning prediction. I just chalk it up to your vast NBA experience. You know, you've got me 14 years to 1 on the NBA ratio. So I bow to you, the guru of NBA predictions. Yes. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's not often, so I'll admit it. But no. But here's the thing, though. Then the point you made during that is like you always talk about that. This is just how things go, and it's the NBA, and they went like this, and then went.
Yeah, and a couple things is, this is more par for the course than exception under Terry Stotts. This team tends to play its best over the last 2 weeks to month of a season. They just, for whatever reason, it's been their MO. Usually they start kind of after the All-Star break is when they, or at least recently, when they kind of start hitting their groove. But they do tend to play their best right before the playoffs. And also, and I think we mentioned this, or I sort of focused on it last time, is I think they knew, at least the coaching staff knew, and I expected there to be kind of a feeling out process or an ironing out the kinks or a lull in their play that was, I expected to be more up and down than just straight down, but
Right.
as they integrated CJ, as they, integrated Nurkic, and as they sort of settled into a rotation, because, if anything, this season has just been so not just up and down from a results standpoint, but from a roster standpoint and a rotation standpoint, and guys in and out, and how Terry and his staff have used them. And so things really seemed to turn around when he just said, you know what, these are my 8 guys. DJJ got iced out there, and here we are. I guess, I wonder, from your perspective, you're in the weeds every day. How are we here from your perspective? How have the Blazers done this? And B, like, did the DJJ stuff, was that a surprise to you? Did that kind of catch you off guard? And where's he kind of at with all this? Would you guess?
Yeah, that's still a mystery. Stotts hasn't really talked much about that.
Mm-hmm.
He said a couple of times, I don't want to disparage
Mm-hmm.
him. So clearly maybe there was some problems with his play, but I didn't think he was that bad. It wasn't that noticeable to where you think, oh, you got to get that guy off the court, especially with what he brings to you defensively. But he's a liability on offense. And from my perspective, they just felt like Powell gives you so much more offense than he does and was equal to him defensively. Mm-hmm. And so why are we going to put DJ out there? But for him to disappear completely from the regular rotation, and then when someone gets injured, oh, DJ, you're starting. Like Powell missed the game and DJ started. And then the next time he just barely played or didn't play at all. So no, that's been fascinating to see. But I think that's basically come down to Powell being a good two-way player and a way better offensive player.
Okay, and what about the larger? I mean, how are we here? You had punted on this team a couple weeks ago. You were counting.
I didn't quite.
You were ready to collect your money that we didn't even. And then now here we are. Now you're gearing up for a finals run.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned about figuring out the rotations, getting used to Powell, Nurkic coming back. There were a lot of things that went on in April that were just really negative for this team, and Nurkic came back on March 26th. That was the same day Powell made his first appearance with the Blazers at Orlando. They beat Orlando, they beat Toronto, they beat Detroit. Those games didn't mean anything. When they really got into a tough stretch against some good teams, the lack of chemistry and Nurkic being on a minutes rotation really started to reveal itself, I felt, with blowout losses to Milwaukee. I'm looking at right now, Clippers, Utah thumped them. Then they lost to Miami. They lost by 1 to Boston. And that was sort of when things started to turn around. That 1 point loss to Boston, I thought, because not only was Nurkic not fully back, but Powell in the month of April, and not many people have mentioned this, but I thought it was significant. He came to Portland from Toronto shooting 44% from three-point range. You're Portland, you're going to a 3-guard lineup, so you're going to be small. Therefore, 2 of those 3 guards have to be lights out for you to survive the small lineup, I believe. And this guy comes over and shooting, I write here, 27.8% from threes during the month. In that same month, Lillard had one of the worst months of his career. I did an article on it. I went back and looked at every month he's ever played, and it was in definitely the bottom 5. I had it one or two in the worst month he's ever had in terms of shooting percentage. He was at 39.9% for the month, but there was a stretch where he was 37.6 through the first 13 games when they went 3-10. And he was only averaging 22 points per game. This is a guy who prior to that was averaging 30 points a game and was an MVP candidate. So the combination of Nurkic trying to work his way back, the tough schedule, Powell couldn't make a shot, and Lillard all of a sudden was playing horribly, mainly because of his body breaking down. The guy was suffering a lot of injuries. All those things coincided to a hideous start to April. And then all of a sudden, those things started to lessen. Powell started hitting shots. Lillard got healthier. Nurkic's minutes restrictions got removed. And then the key, at Indiana, when they beat Indiana, Damian Lillard said after the game that the team, the players basically just came together and said, we need to cut this crap out and start playing defense. We need to be committed. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to play desperate. We need to focus on playing real defensive basketball. And since that point, they have like the 1 or 2 best defensive ratings in the league. So all that coinciding with the decision to play defense by the entire team, including Lillard, who to that point had one of the worst defensive ratings in the league among any player playing a certain amount of minutes, were all huge factors in them turning this thing around.
Makes sense. right?
Hey,
Hey,
now here's another thing. Go ahead.
and oh, I was just gonna say, and this is what I feel like a broken record, but it is no small coincidence that the return of your best and most important defender makes your defense substantially better. Playing
Duh.
without Nurkic for as long as they
Right.
did, and it's not just like a lockdown defender or something. It is a guy who is your back line of defense. He's your anchor. He kind of makes the whole thing go. And you could argue that the Blazers should be better. That they shouldn't have to rely on one force to be respectable defensively. But the fact remains that he is the linchpin for so much that they do defensively. And
Correct.
him gone and him kind of back, being too cute Nurkic instead of the beast Nurkic. That's almost worse because he's there, but he's not, and he's playing, 18, 20 minutes or whatever. You're not getting the full Monty. So, the return of the Yusuf Nurkic that we've kind of come to expect, I think, stating the obvious, that's the biggest factor in this team's late season surge and turnaround.
Correct. And Stotts kept talking about that. At the start of the second half, he said the goal was to finish in the top half defensively for the second half, not for the season, for the second half. And he kept talking about the return of Nurkic and what that was going to mean. Now, when Nurkic initially came back, there was no evidence of that, but he was on a minutes restriction. Then he had the knee inflammation, right? He wasn't quite right. What was fascinating was when during the 5-game losing streak, I remember people were saying, because before that, he was like, I feel good about where we are. I feel good about where we're headed. But they kept losing, right? They lost by 1 to Boston. They went to Charlotte and lost that game when Charlotte was missing Ball. Two other good players. I can't remember who they are right now. And Rozier lit them up. Then they came home. They lost to the Clippers by 1 without Lillard. Then they lost to Denver by 1. So and they lost to Memphis by 2. And people were asking Stotts, do you still feel good about the team? He was like, yeah, we're close. And people on Twitter were mocking him. Oh, Stotts is an idiot. How can you say this? They keep losing. Well, he knew what he was talking about because he was seeing they were losing close games to good teams and they weren't quite whole. And then they became whole and they started ripping off wins. Now, I have to say this because, it's just being objectively fair. Even though they've been on this great run, there's a little bit of a caveat to it. Because 5 of the wins came against teams who were minus their best players. So there's a little part of me that's like, okay, they've been playing great, but Indiana didn't have Sabonis. Brooklyn didn't have Durant or Harden. Lakers didn't have LeBron. And then Utah didn't have Donovan Mitchell or Mike Conley Jr. And then Phoenix didn't have Ayton. And then on top of that, Denver didn't care. So there's a little bit of me that wonders, but there's no denying that regardless of all that, they played well because